Hey everybody, Aaron Cowan, Sage Dynamics. In this video, we're going to talk about pistol versus carry ammunition for zero on a handgun optic. As handgun optics become more prevalent, more common, as they start to slowly replace the iron sights on the handgun as the default method of aiming, curious questions come up and curious situations come up, which is good. We want to be asking these high-functioning questions about our equipment in regards to our fundamentals and how we apply them. And one question that I get consistently is, should I zero on my range ammo or zero on my self-defense ammo? The easy answer to that question is zero on your self-defense ammo, because that's the ammunition and the zero that's going to matter the most. Next question I get is, am I going to have a consistent or a significant point of aim, point of impact shift between my carry ammunition and my range ammunition? The answer to that question is probably going to be yes, but it's also going to be with a caveat of it depends on which two ammunitions you're using. Now, there's just no way, conceivably, for the sake of this video, that I could compare all conceivable popular self-defense ammunitions and all conceivable popular range ammunitions. Range ammunition is an even larger category because there's so many people who do reloads. Granted, the weights are all consistent, but they come from different manufacturers, different processes, different QC. So there's going to be some tolerance issues that you may notice in those ammunitions. So it's best to just kind of experiment with this for yourself. But as an example, to maybe prime you to either say, okay, my stuff's good to go based on what I'm using, or be like, oh, I should go check my stuff, is an example of my carry ammunition versus two popular range ammunitions. My carry ammunition is 124 grain gold dot. In this, I'll be shooting it out of my carry/duty gun, which is an Agency Field 17 aftermarket barrel, RMO7, with the 6.5 MOA dot. For the comparison process, I'm going to be shooting from 25 yards, which is the zero distance of my carry gun. Yours may be 15, which means you may not notice as large of a variance depending on the two different types of ammunition you're using. 25 is a good point of aim, point of impact for my gun because it's a full-size 17 suppressor height sights. So my point of aim, point of impact if I'm using irons is very similar to what I get when I independently use my zero dot. Now I'm going to bag the gun down. I'm going to minimize as much human error input as possible because we are talking about a handgun, so I've got less points of contact, so it's inherently just a little bit more inaccurate. Not necessarily barrel length-wise because we're only shooting 25, but just human interaction, human error, natural tremor. These things can factor into not being able to see exactly what's going on. So I don't want to do it standing because I want to maximize my chances for seeing exactly where my gun is hitting. Your gun, which may not be a Glock 17, it may be something else. Something to consider is if the information isn't available to you, see if you can find what your firearm's factory point of aim, point of impact is and what ammo was used to determine that. 124 grain is a really common ammo you see with firearms manufacturers, and some guns point of aim, point of impact is 15. So if you're even considering this for your iron sights, not just the guys that run dot guns, and of course once you throw suppressor height sights on a factory gun, you may change your point of aim, point of impact. I can almost guarantee that you will. In fact, I don't think I've ever personally seen a gun that didn't change it even just a little. So that's actually a factor to consider as well. First two groups I should say that you're going to see is 124 grain Blazer brass compared to my 124 grain gold dot carry ammunition. So as you can see, there was a difference shooting from 25. The difference wasn't significant, which is why I like to shoot 124 grain range ammunition, practice ammunition, because it's the same grain weight as my carry ammunition. Granted, the two rounds are going to have different ballistic properties because one is ball ammunition, the other is a hollow point, maybe different powders used. There's a bunch of different factors that we can consider when we get into the very specific details of ballistics. But for the purposes of training on the handgun, I'm comfortable with that slight variance, so I'm not really going to have to worry about drastically rethinking how I'm going to approach training versus carry ammunition. For 9mm The most common round I encounter, and probably the round that most of you watching this are using for the range, is 115 grain. 150 grain used to be the most inexpensive, the most prevalent, the most common. You saw it a lot. Now, if I'm going to zero my RMR on 124 or 147, depending on what your carry ammunition of choice is, I wouldn't recommend 115 just because ballistic properties are not as good as you get out of 124 or 147. That's kind of a different conversation. But if I'm going to, for example, because I'm giving the example, I'm going to shoot first group, which is going to be 115 blazer brass, and then we'll shoot again 124 grain gold dot. So I would say that point of aim, point of impact difference between the two ammunitions was more drastic, relatively speaking. That doesn't mean I can't shoot 115 for training or practice, but what it does mean is I need to make sure that I understand that I'm going to have some differences. And this is one of the biggest reasons why I would never zero my carry gun. I would never zero any gun on just range ammo. Rifle's a good example of that for me. My carry ammunition in rifle is 75 grain gold dot, but I traditionally shoot 55 grain because it's the most common ammunition to find. If I can find some 62 grain, I'll use that. It all depends on price. I just have to have an understanding of the 55 grain is going to give me the performance I want in practice. The 75 grain has to give me that point of aim, point of impact based on zero distance that I need for self-defense or duty. So I wouldn't feel comfortable in any situation zeroing a optic for any firearm whatsoever on range ammunition and then changing, even if they're the same weight, and then chambering up with carry ammunition and assuming the point of aim, point of impact based on zero distance is going to be the same. Of course, this video wasn't for everyone. I'm sure a lot of you, especially those of you who've been shooting red dot handguns for a while, have already figured this out, and that's great. But make sure you share the information with people. If this topic comes up, feel free to share this video or just the information that you gleaned from this video. You know, obviously, being able to link to a second independent source such as myself will be helpful in the conversation that you're going to have. Trust but verify. I encourage all of you who've never experimented with this to go ahead and take it to the range and try it out and see if there's a huge difference between the ammunition you're carrying for self-defense and the ammunition you traditionally shoot for practice. Now, if you're one of those guys that, and there's nothing wrong with this, I want to go ahead and preface that, one of those guys that buys the cheapest ammo no matter what because you're on a budget, then you're not going to see the same consistency from type to type. I generally try to stay within the same couple of brands for my training ammunition as so I don't have as large discrepancies. Consistently, what I've noticed, a good example is Prime. Their Prime ammunition's 124 grain ammunition for the 9mm shoots point of aim, point of impact at zero distance almost exactly the same as my 124 grain gold dot. But Prime's a little bit more pricey because it's a higher quality training ammunition. I can almost sometimes just shoot gold dot for the same price that I'm going to pay for 1,000 rounds of Prime. So blazer brass, Fiocchi is another one that I'll use. S&B, I've had problems with S&B in the past. I haven't had any problems with it recently, so maybe it was just a couple bad lots or just my bad luck. But there's so many different types of ammunitions out there. And I do shoot reloaded handgun ammunition if it's from a quality manufacturer or remanufacturer, if you will. I tend to stay away from reloads on the rifle just because of pressure issues and things that I might be a little bit more worried about if the ammunition is bad. It can be a little more catastrophic in a rifle necessarily than it would be in a handgun. Separate conversation. But that's just an example of 3 different types of ammunition. 124 grain, my carry gold dot, compared to 124 grain, similar weight from Blazer, and Blazer's 115. Your data is probably going to be different. Dot size, of course, can factor into it. Zero distance can factor into it. And then just the shooter's natural ability, even with the gun back down, to be able to deliver consistent accuracy. So these are some factors that you should consider when you're thinking about your carry versus your training ammunition. My advice, the short of it, is going to be 0 on your carry ammunition. Know where your range ammunition shoots. I'm Aaron Cowan with Sage Dynamics. Train accordingly.